be? Now that you're not a kid anymore.
You're not a kid anymore.
I know just what to say. I answer right away. There's just one thing I've been wishing for. I wanna be Bobby's girl. I wanna be Bobby's girl. That's the most important thing.
Well, we're here, we're trying to tell ourselves we're here to celebrate the good life of Bob MacNaughton, and I think we are, and I think we'll eventually get to that point. Portions of my talk may not have narration, because I wouldn't be surprised if I become verklempt in my bosom and unable to talk, so you'll bear with me. Bob and I are an eHarmony success story. We met online about 3 years ago, and after a book-long email courtship, our first date was actually a moonlight kayaking trip in Mississippi. Bob's kayak capsized at some point, and we weren't able to ride it under the circumstances, and he ended up riding on top of the guide's kayak the rest of the paddle. They say you can tell a lot about the character of a man by how he reacts when the waiter spills soup on his shirt, when the driver cuts him off in traffic, how he behaves with small children, and how he handles a capsized kayak in the dark in the swamp. And I already liked Bob by the time we got back to dry land. Bob loved water and boats. You've already heard that. And in his younger days, he was a championship water skier, and he led the University of Tennessee water ski team while he attended college. We dusted off his competition boat the first summer that we were together, and sure enough, he still had it, and at 66, he could still do his ski tricks, although his hair had changed considerably. Bob had his Marine captain's license, and he piloted a 35-foot Carver motor yacht named Uno Mas. The boat arrived in New Orleans about a year ago from San Diego, and we had it moored at Seabrook Harbor. And it gave us a floating apartment about 10 minutes from the French Quarter, and it was the home base for a lot of our New Orleans activities. And it wasn't a bad place to wake up in the mornings. Bob liked to cook, and he liked to eat, and he liked to drink beer, and his margaritas were legendary. And he knew all Paul Prudhomme's secrets. It was a hobby to identify new places to eat and to explore the foodscape. Not all places were fancy. Any place we hadn't been before was the likely candidate. He was a snob when it came to chain restaurants, and he avoided them. He always had a Zagat guide and a Yelp app available on his phone. He did like hot sauce. We attended many pop-up dinners and wine tastings around Baton Rouge. We also had a lot of fun exploring craft beers. We have this phone app called Untapped, and you could track the beers that you tried, and you could locate nearby breweries just by typing in the application. And so we visited quite a few breweries. One thing we learned that every brewery has a bushy-bearded guy named Zach who makes the beer. At that last count, we had sampled 347 distinct beers. Now, Bob loved to volunteer for events, and usually the only tangible reward was a t-shirt. But we worked our butts off for the lights of the Super Bowl and the Women's Final Four and the NBA All-Star Game, WrestleMania, the New Orleans Wine and Food Experience, the New Orleans Carrier Ball, the New Orleans Beer Fest, the French Quarter Festival, the Christmas in New Orleans, the Royal Street Stroll, the Deer Lake Flotilla, and the Deer Lake Jug Band Boogie in northern Minnesota. Not to mention our activities working with the Land Trust for Louisiana Silent Auction, and he was a dapper bartender for the Unitarian Church auction just a few weeks ago. So with public service in his blood, Bob dallied briefly in politics, launching his 2016 presidential campaign from the steps of the Louisiana Capitol to an underwhelming but ever-growing crowd of supporters. Bob loved maps and navigation, and he regularly entered the St. Valentine's Day Massacre map contest. And he spent hours poring over routes and instructions to make this fictitious journey from the Statue of Liberty to the Golden Gate Bridge. And he invariably was the champion of whatever state he happened to be living in. And he just won. He was just the Louisiana champion in this competition. This arrived just a week ago. Every morning, Bob got up and he worked both crossword puzzles in the paper before he even finished his first cup of coffee, without even cheating. He had so many alma maters that he always had a dog in the hunt for college sports. After Bob and I took this OLLI course called Inside LSU Sports, he became a Tiger fan. And so we used to attend football, basketball, baseball, softball, gymnastics competitions whenever we had the chance. And we always made a point to make sure we bought John Jackson's tickets that he donated to the church auction every year. And so we enjoyed a lot of football games under those circumstances. If we couldn't make it to actually the games themselves, our next best thing was to scour the countryside and find a bar that would host, would turn their TV set to LSU sports. And when we were in Minnesota, we sometimes had to drive a long ways to find a bar that would actually do that. The hallmark of our relationship was really just do it. We could have been a Nike commercial, really. We joined a biker gang, and we were a really tough biker gang. We took a ride down the Tangi Trace with members of the church. We all wore our helmets. We rode horses. We fed horses. We kayaked. Sometimes we even kayaked in our backyard when we had the big rain a year or so ago. The water came all the way up to my back porch, and we put the kayaks in and rode down the backyard. We dabbled in acting. We were actually cast as extras in the Bonnie and Clyde, in a dance scene, no less. And our scene actually ended up on the cutting room floor, so we didn't actually make the silver screen, but we had a lot of fun. And Bob was actually the star in this production that I made called Love Bites, which Nathan thought was too risque to show in the service today, a bit too racy. If you ever get the computer to work, you can see me afterwards. Bob tolerated my passion for photography, and he was always willing to pose for me, almost all the time. He was sort of like my little photographic garden gnome that I took with me and posed in front of every place we went. And I loved his playful sense of, and his dry sense of humor. We had a lot of fun. He was my real-life frog prince. And then some of you may have seen the picture of Bob with the guitar on stage. That was Bob. He was actually the I never heard Bob ever sing a note, and he didn't play the guitar either. But he did look like a rock star. So Bob Dylan MacNaughton, you've heard of him, haven't you? So Bob and I were snowbirds, and we would load up all the toys in the trailer and head north every summer. And we would spend the summer on the hill overlooking Deer Lake in northern Minnesota. And then we'd return in the fall to catch the football games. We spent a lot of our time on our ATV, our Razor. And we blazed trails, we picked mushrooms, we tried to avoid a lot of wildlife in the form of bears. We got lost, and you see I'm missing this really good picture of him out in the middle of nowhere actually reading a map because we're lost. So you know you're in trouble when you got a man reading a map in the middle of the woods. Last year we competed in the Mud Nationals, which are the big ATV competition up in northern Minnesota. And I had this dramatic picture of us going through the mud, except it wasn't really us. We competed in the poker run scavenger hunt and not in the other events. But the other competitors teased Bob because our machine was so clean that he strategically posed so I could take a picture of him standing next to somebody else's muddy machine so that he would have a picture he could claim he'd been to the Mud Nationals. He loved parades, he loved catching beads, and we used to take all our beads, we'd recycle them, and then we had a float in the rodeo parade up in Minnesota, and so we would throw beads up in the rodeo parades. We competed in the first and second Deer Lake Run, Walk, Crawl 5Ks. The first year, much to our surprise, we both won first place. The second year, there was more than one person in our class. And all we got was a participation medal. I don't know how much Bob actually liked to dance, but he knew that I loved to dance. And dancing was our happy place. We took dance lessons 2 to 3 times a week over at Rick Seeling's. And we danced at every bar within 30 miles of the lake up in northern Minnesota, all 4 of them. According to Stanford University, I think that's Pete's alma mater, dancing is the best activity to stave off dementia. And so we were doing our part. Bob loved animals. He was always the first one to reach for a creature if you walked in and somebody had a dog or a cat, a bird, horses. He really liked animals. He lost his dog Bo last Thanksgiving. He had for 13 years. Just a long-term companion. Now, Bob's family is spread across the globe. He doesn't get to see them very often, but he loves them a lot, and he's really proud of them. His sister Margie and family live in California. His brother Jimmy is in Japan. He has cousins and nieces and aunts in Texas and Michigan and Oregon and California, and probably more places than that. Bob's family grew in size when he hooked up with me because he fit right in, and we had lots of family gatherings here locally. And that sound that I hear back there, maybe she'd like to come up here. My granddaughter Claire brought out the sweetest side of Bob. He taught her how to high five, and she taught him how to fist bump. She would crawl up on his lap and say, "Read me." Usually one of his paperback books that didn't have any pictures, and he'd have to invent a story. And they found lots of things to do at the barn. They'd feed the horses, they'd ride in the wagon, they'd swing. And he taught her how to catch a ball, stretch rubber bands, use magnifying glasses. And she would take apart his 3D puzzles, and that kept him entertained for hours, trying to put them back together. And she tried to teach him about iPads, but it's just only so much you can teach someone. So there was so much more to learn and so much more to teach. There just wasn't enough time. And the pictures that I have out on the back that I can't show you here, that are on the table out there, were the last pictures that I took of Bob. We'd actually gone down to New Orleans for a meeting of the Land Trust, and it was a foggy day, and we were standing on the shore of Lake Pontchartrain, and those are the pictures of him kind of looking off into the fog. So while I'm really thankful for the good life we had, I'm really selfish too, and we just wanted more.